Hello everyone and welcome to this monthly update. Today we're going to talk about the product terms update and any other licensing news for the month of December 2022. It's going to be a short video this time around because there, as you can see on the screen, there isn't a lot of worth mentioning from the product terms this time around or any other topics. One of the big topics that we've been covering over the past weeks is the pricing increases that are again happening on the Microsoft front. Do check out our content around that we have uploaded last week. SQL is getting a price increase. Microsoft is going to work with the US dollar price list and create currency updates on other price lists that they publish at a semi-annual interval. Basically, they probably see that there's too many differences in the Microsoft world when they look at all the different price lists, so they wanted to do something about it. They have the new Azure model in MCA where they are already doing this, so they thought, why not do that for all our price lists and make some more money because of it. Well, that's my takeaway anyway. Anyway, on top of that, you can find those updates on our LinkedIn page, obviously, or on YouTube. They should be one of the first hits that you see when you go to our LinkedIn or a YouTube page. And with that, I want to dive into the update for this month. You can see that there has been a slight overhaul on the product terms page. They use all these nice little logos now. But additionally, you see that they have linked the data protection addendum and the service level agreement document right off the bat on the start screen. So this is a welcome update if you ask me. This used to be a separate document that you had to download. Right now it's included. So that is very easily for you to reference instead of switching between documents. It's now also in the product terms website. And they have added licensing resources here on the bottom left, where you can see things around subscription license suites, licensing briefs, and the licensing program guides, which is very welcome as well, because these are probably documents that you might generally want to download or read through when you are unclear on what something in the product terms means. So additional updates on the left navigation layout, as they state here, is that they put all the other legal terms that had their own page or still have their own page. They put it in a drop-down. So if you search for CAL management license equivalency, you can still find that here. It's just under a drop-down menu now, so don't worry, it didn't disappear. And any other items like software assurance benefits or subscription license suites that you might reference often are all found there now. That's one of the biggest updates, and they already did it November 17th. While they were doing that, there were 3 other items that we will go through in a bit that they have updated on the product terms. But first, I want to start with the top one. So the Universal License Terms for Online Services has an update to the acceptable use policy that you can see here. It has to do with cryptocurrency. Basically, Microsoft states that you cannot, without Microsoft prior written approval, use the Microsoft cloud basically to mine cryptocurrency. So if you were doing that, you're probably going to want to get in touch with your Microsoft representative or a representative and request them if that is okay or not. Then Azure DevOps server, Microsoft released the 2022 version that you can see here. So this is the successor of the 2020 version. 2020 version is now the prior version, obviously, that you may still use if you have bought the licenses or you have it under SA, then you can use the latest version 2022, but you can continue to use 2020 as well. On the notices page, they added a standard notice for communication services all the way in the bottom. Certain online services provide services for voice and text communication, called communication services. And these communication services are provided by Microsoft through the Microsoft affiliate or other service provider authorized to administer them. Pricing for communication services may include applicable taxes and fees. Communication service terms may vary from country to country. All included taxes, fees, and terms for communication services are disclosed in the terms of use available on the volume licensing site. If we go through to the updates of November 17th, you will see that they have made some changes to BizTalk and SQL Server around the licensing model in line with the October announcements. So what happened here is that for BizTalk, they state that if you license on individual virtual operating system environment, your licenses should be subscription licenses or licenses with active software assurance. And this is quite new because this didn't used to be in the product terms. So right now they state that you either need to have a subscription license for BizTalk or software assurance license to be able to license BizTalk on a virtual operating system environment. Additionally, customer may reassign any of its licenses to any of its licensed servers located within the same server farm as often as needed. You may also reassign these licenses from one server farm to another, but not on a short-term basis, i.e. not within 90 days. This is usually the case with Microsoft licenses, and this also counts here. On the SQL front, SQL 2022 is generally available as of 22nd of November, so already a week ago or so, a little bit more. No massive licensing changes except the same one that you saw for BizTalk. To be able to license SQL Server by individual virtual operating system environment, you would need to have either a SQL Server subscription license or a license with active software assurance only. And also here you can move these server licenses within your server farm as often as needed, but across server farms you would only be able to do that on a 90-day basis, after a 90-day basis. Additional changes here, unlimited virtualization has gotten a little revamp. So when licensing by physical core, customer with active software assurance may run any number of instances on the server software and any number of OSCs on any licensed server. And fail overrides has a slight update to it, where one on Microsoft Azure Services subject to ratio of qualified licenses to Azure vCores as stipulated in the Azure Hybrid Benefit terms for SQL Server. So you can use a failover operating system environment within Azure, but only if you stick to the rules as set forth in the table around Azure Hybrid Benefit. So that's the table where you can see, okay, if I have these licenses, I'm allowed to run these amount of vCores for that specific Azure SQL product. Then unlimited containers is a new addition. So when licensing by virtual operating system environment, customers with active SA may run any number of instances of the server software in any number of containers in the virtual operating system environment on the licensed server. When electing this benefit, a container is not considered to be a virtual operating system environment. This clarification was probably highly needed because it was unclear on how Microsoft handled containers. And they have described here that if you're using containers, it is not considered to be a virtual operating system environment by itself. They removed a clause around big data clusters. Big data clusters, as far as I know, have been end of life, are no longer be able to be purchased. And a SQL Server Enterprise Core and a SQL Server Enterprise Machine Learning Server for Windows and Machine Learning Server for Linux has been removed as well. And finally, SQL Server Enterprise Core running Machine Learning Server for Hadoop. I'm assuming that product has been discontinued as well. Finally, because of these changes, the Microsoft Azure page has undergone some changes as well, which we will go through now. This page keeps getting bigger and bigger every time I tell you. The fail overrides for SQL Server Standard Enterprise Virtual Machines. This clause has been very slimmed down. It just reads, when allocating SQL Server licenses for use under the Azure Hybrid Benefit for SQL Server, customer is entitled to the respective fail overrides for the Azure service in use. See service-specific terms below. So what they say here is that there's different ways of you to use this, and they have written and outlined it further below. So if we go all the way down to the bottom, let's go back here in a sec. Here it was, I believe. Yeah. Here they describe Azure SQL Managed Instance, what your SQL Server fail overrides are, and Azure SQL Server Virtual Machines. So these are handled almost similarly, but with some differences. So they had to rewrite the SQL Server fail overrides clause for these. So a SQL Managed Instance include the following failover entitlements: one geo secondary specifically for disaster recovery purposes, and the rest of the clause reads as it used to. And for Azure SQL Server Virtual Machines, the SQL Server Virtual Machine include the following failover entitlements: one failover operating system environment for any purpose, including high availability, and one failover operating server environment specifically for disaster recovery purposes. So for Azure SQL Server Virtual Machines, you have two options that you can leverage for your SQL Server failover rights. Also here some removals. Azure Communication Services, a lot of items have been removed from it. Basically, this kept expanding and expanding, and I think they've moved it now to the notices page, as I described earlier, where they slimmed it down and just stated, this is how we handle Azure Communication Services, and go to the website if you want to learn more. So they had written it out entirely for all the different items within Azure Communication Services, but now they have put all that on a separate website. As you can see, it has become quite big, so that makes sense. Then you have the OpenAI service. In addition to limited access services terms above, the following terms apply to the use of Azure OpenAI service. There's use limitations, so Microsoft may limit customer access to use to or use of output content or the Azure OpenAI service if Microsoft has a reasonable basis to believe that the output content or customers' use of the Azure OpenAI service violates the acceptable use policy, is inconsistent with information submitted, is inconsistent with requirements in the product documentation, as updated from time to time. Output content means any data or content output by the Azure OpenAI service. You may not use the OpenAI service to discover any underlying components of the models, algorithms, and systems. And you may not use web scraping, harvesting, or data extraction methods to extract data from Azure OpenAI. A data access and use policy has been added, except as provided below. As part of providing the Azure OpenAI service, Microsoft will process and store customer data submitted to the service, as well as output content for purposes of monitoring for and preventing abusive or harmful uses or outputs, developing, testing, and improving capabilities, designed to prevent abusive use of and/or harmful outputs from the service. Authorized Microsoft employees may review data that has triggered or automated systems to investigate and verify potential abuse. So this is where they state that if you use Azure OpenAI services, doesn't follow the standard data policies that Microsoft has for Azure. Instead, there are additional uses where Microsoft can access your data if, for instance, they think that something malicious is going on. The foregoing customer data processing terms will not apply if and to the extent customer is approved for and complies with all requirements to use the Azure OpenAI service with modified content filtering and or abuse monitoring. Now above here, there was another removal as well, the mobility API. Not sure about why has happened. And they removed some clauses on the imagery data aspect. So this is basically what I wanted to cover for this month. Like I said, not a big update, but apparently still a lot to cover. 15 minutes in already. If you're still with me, thank you for watching as always, and we hope to see you again soon. Bye.